Hello, listener. I'm so glad you're here. Today's discussion highlights two of the authors in the upcoming book, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work. This book is scheduled to be published on May 30th, 2025, so just less than 2 months away. This collaborative book has 24 contributing authors from the Changing Work Collective, an online community of conscious humans who aim to change work from the inside out. If you're interested in checking out any of Changing Work's books, you can find them on bookshop.org, that's bookshop.org, or amazon.com. My name is Wayne Wright-Hugh. I'm a technology leader and a leadership coach who focuses on helping neurodivergent people uncover their unique strengths and thrive. I'm also a member of the Changing Work Collective. I'm an author from Changing Work's second book, Leading with Compassion, and I'll be your host for today. Our authors for today's panel discussion are Nia Bajaj and Shelly Damija. Hello, Nia. Hello, Shelly. How are you today?
Good. How are you guys?
Excited to be here.
Let's start with quick introductions. Tell us who you are, what brought you to Changing Work, and what brought you to becoming a co-author of this book. Let's start with you, Nia.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Nia or Naya, doesn't matter which one, so long as I know who you're speaking to. And I use she, her pronouns. I'm an immigrant to and settler on Treaty 3, or Dish with One Spoon land, which is now known as Toronto, Ontario. I'm an award-winning mental health champion, an internationally certified yoga therapist, and a narrative medicine facilitator, which are a lot of big words, and not everyone knows what they mean all of the time. And most of my work is in helping burned out leaders restore their well-being, reconnect to that sense of purpose that inspired them to lead in the first place so they can make the change that they want to see in the world. And that's why I joined Changing Work.
Thank you, Nia. Now I might switch in our conversation from Nia to Naya if I don't quite remember it in my head. My apologies in advance for that. Was there a reason why you were excited to participate as a contributing author for this book?
Yes. Wellness-centered leadership is a big part of what I talk about and how I like to lead. And it's founded at its core, trust and psychological safety. And when I found a community of humans who believed in those things as strongly as the Changing Work community did, it made a lot of sense to be in a place that really centered humanity over hierarchy. It was so refreshing. And I'd seen previous author calls come out for collaborative books, and I've been published in peer review spaces. I've been published in industry blogs. I've done the magazine thing. And I found writing always to be a little bit lonely. So I loved the idea of being part of a community that came together to shift ideas, to shift ways of thinking. And it was just so refreshing to be part of something bigger than myself while, making the kind of change that I want to see in the world. So I'm really excited for this.
Thank you, Nia. How about you, Shelly?
Yeah, that was impressive, Nia. Glad to meet you. For me, I'm Shelly. I am a friend, a mentor, and a coach. And professionally, I work at LinkedIn in the engineering organization. And my career journey has spanned from being a code writer, engineer, program manager, product manager, eng manager. And my personal passion brought me to study organization development. I do that, bits and pieces of it in every role I play. That's my passion. And I think that led me to be on a quest of how to be useful. And that's what connected me to Scott's work, who's our co-founder for Changing Work. And I actually worked with Scott back at LinkedIn. So I also saw him in action at LinkedIn, how while being a VP of global operations, he actually implemented those things. And that kind of connected me with him. And I was following his work. And when this opportunity presented itself to be a part of this collaborative book and matched up to my quest of being useful by sharing my experiences, I think that connected well. And so I did book 2 with Wayne, Leading with Compassion. And I actually really enjoyed that experience. And also just wanted to make it real for me, like, because when I did that first book, it was so exciting, like felt like a dream at times. So I wanted to see that, is it real or a dream? So I said, okay, let me just sign up for the next book also and do the same to make it more real. And here I am on this book journey with all of you.
If it happens twice, it must be real.
Yes.
Shelley, when you said, I'm a friend, I'm a mentor, and I'm a coach, I think for me, the most valuable of the three is the first one. Very hard to find in today's world.
Yep. Yeah.
I think you already covered. I was about to ask you, Shelley, because I know we worked on the second book together. So I was about to ask you, like, what made you come back the second time? And looks like you already answered that question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the theme of this book, the third of its kind, as you both pointed out, is Are We Friends or Coworkers? So when you first heard about this book that Changing Work was putting together, what came to mind for you? And what was it that really captivated you as sort of a theme you personally wanted to talk about? And maybe let's start with you this time, Shelley, and then move to Nia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I heard the topic first time, I think it happened while we were working on Leading with Compassion itself, and our editor, Lisa, was collecting some thoughts on it. And my immediate response to it, like in my head, was that, is that even a question? Like, are we friends or are we co-workers? And I was like, actually, the real question for me is, are we as kind, as honest, as respectful to our co-workers as we are to our friends and family? So I think that just curiosity was like, okay, I need to explore this. Is it like, that was my first response and spontaneous, and that is what I have actually explored in the chapter. And I truly believe that if we just bring that kindness, respect, love, and compassion, what we show to our family and friends at work, I think then everything will become effortless. Sounds very simple.
I have some follow-up questions for you, Shelley, but I'll hold them for a little bit because they are about your chapter.
Sure.
Let's give Nia a chance to share her reason for really being attracted to this specific theme for this book, and then we'll jump into some questions about your two wonderful chapters.
I love the maturity of your response, Shelley. It was definitely not how I came at this. When I first
That's what the gray hair is.
Mine is starting to happen. I'm not there yet, but I'll get there. When I first heard the theme, there's actually a very visceral memory that I have of when I finally sort of landed my first permanent position after 8 years of really precarious work. And one of the managers on that team, who I didn't report to, said, Naya, come in for a one-on-one. And I was really confused. I was kind of grumpy about it because I had a bunch of deadlines to meet. And we're having a conversation and sharing about ourselves. And she kept asking questions, and I was a little bit resistant. And she noticed that resistance and she asked me why. And I still have a little bit of like some visceral embarrassment because I looked at her and said, I'm really not here to make friends. I'm just here to get this job done. And it's embarrassing to say this now because I've realized what an unhelpful approach that is. And I've come a long way since then. It's not who I am anymore. But I really seen how the approach of centering product over people can do a lot of serious harm. It's done a lot of serious harm to my well-being, and I've not been a good colleague in certain places and spaces. And now that I know better, I was really excited at the opportunity to sort of share so that I hope leaders or readers can make sort of less expensive learning lessons based on what I've shared. They can have an easier go of things.
I love that story, Nia. At work, we often manage by objectives. So we think about like, what is the objective we need to accomplish? And often it's some business goal, as you can imagine. But then if you ask someone like, well, what is the objective behind the objective? And then if you ask the question enough times, it'll probably come back to people. If you ask people like, why do you work so hard in your job? It's often about like, oh, I want to make an impact in my consumer's life or someone else's life, or want to make a living for my family. Like, it often comes back to people. You just have to ask the question enough times to get there. Perfect. So I'll jump. Yeah,
the
go on,
thought
Shelley.
popped
Yeah.
up in my head, Wayne, and want to share, like, connecting it to the leading with compassion, I feel like if you're happy, then you will anyways do everything right. So it's just like a virtuous cycle, in my opinion, right? Which connects the two dots. Like you keep asking, why are you doing it? What makes you? And you say, yeah, I just want to be happy. And if you are happy, then everything you do is with compassion and it just adds up. Mm.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Virtuous cycle. Yes. Mm.
I'd love to make a transition now to asking both of you some questions about your chapters. We'll start with Unia, if that's okay with you. Your story begins with a really strong hook. It begins with a story, which as I was reading it, sort of asked me a very poignant question. In my words, the question was, is this where I belong? By the end of the chapter, though, you never quite come back to the question, and so I felt like I was in one of those cliffhanger type situations. Maybe there's a sequel to this chapter coming soon. So I'm curious, what was your answer? Did you feel you belonged in the place you were at?
I love this question. And now I'm like, oh, maybe there should be a sequel where I actually answer it properly. And I wish there was a straightforward answer to it. Because at its core, it really does come down to that sense of being psychologically safe. And for me, that varies person to person, team to team, one part of the organization to another part of the organization. And so there are absolutely places where I feel completely safe being curious and sometimes disruptive and, showing up as my neurodiverse self. Because I know that the people in those spaces will value the lived expertise that I bring. They'll value the perspective because it's different from theirs, and they're looking for that. They're looking to be, gently challenged. They're looking to see it from a different angle. But there are also other places where it's just better for me to keep my head down and my mouth shut. And that's how we get through work. And that's what the time allows. It's what the resources allow. There isn't the luxury to unpack all of the different things. So the answer is a little bit of both. Yes and no. I've found places in the larger workplace where I absolutely belong, and other places where, I can skate by, and that's okay too.
I think this might be a good segue actually to my next question for you. In your story, you introduced the concept of the stoop. How about I just leave it up to you to kind of describe what it is, and how do you know when you have it? But I suspect that the places where you felt like you belong may have been stoops, or I don't know if that's a word, but the plural version of a stoop.
Yeah, and this concept comes from some very, very smart people that I have the luxury of being in company with. And the stoop came about, I want to say, sort of early COVID, early Black Lives Matter. There was a lot of disruption in the world. And there were a lot of us who had big feelings about these things. And my very intelligent colleagues said, what if there could be a place like we were in a neighborhood where you would just sit on someone's stoop and have those big conversations in a community that you're connected to by geography, but by other things as well. And, it's a safe place that you can show up as whoever you are on that day, whether you're feeling really resourced or really not. And people will hold space for you, they'll support you, they'll encourage you. And that really is sort of that gathering of community. There's not, there's no agenda. No one's coming in with like, we need to discuss this framework. There's nothing we need at the end beyond a sense of community. But there's also room to collectively take action to encourage, and in large systems, it's a little bit difficult to be really justice oriented, but to consider, how do we take care of the people who are here? What do we need to do for those of us who have capacity and resources to advocate, for those of us who have capacity and resources for system change? What can we take from this conversation so we can do better? And that really is at its core what it is. It's not always a physical stoop. And at that point, it was entirely virtual. We were not, as much as I would have loved to hang out on someone's back step, that was certainly not the case. It was a Teams meeting. But it was that sense of, there's no hierarchy here. Everyone's voice is valued. There's a little bit of how do we run a meeting properly so that we can have that openness and safety of expression. But beyond that, it really is, do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Do you feel like there's a community that will step up for you when you need resources? And do you feel like there's a community you can step up for when you have capacity?
One of the questions that our listeners might have in their heads, or maybe it's just me, so I'll ask the selfish question, is how do you know when you have something like that? Sometimes at work we encounter groups of people that feel like it, but how do we know that it is a stoop in the way you define it?
I'm gonna get a little nerdy here, and I hope that's okay. Part of this is sort of, the yoga therapy experience, and folks, listening may be familiar with polyvagal theory, but it's that sense of safety, literal sense of safety in the body. Your breath is calm and slow and smooth and relaxed. Your shoulders aren't hiked up to your ears. There may be a little bit of trepidation still, sharing things is vulnerable, but where vulnerability feels okay, as opposed to this is going to have lots of nasty repercussions. And there is some practice in that, and my chapter sort of dives into the discomfort of finding and sitting with, can I say this to this room of people? But once there is that sense of embodied belonging, you're there.
I really love that answer, because the answer basically is you will feel it in your body. Yeah.
And your body won't lie to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pretend.
Yeah. I mean, that totally resonates with me, and it's interesting. Actually, I explored that concept in my chapter in Leading with Compassion. Like, your body is the source of truth for you, how you're feeling, and how, like, you don't have to focus on other people, whether you can trust them or not. You just have to go inside and observe what your body reactions are to that person, and you will know whether you can, like, going back to what you were talking about, like if you're relaxed, calm, or you're feeling more positive, right? Like, and your body is just a tool for knowing that. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, the core of every mindfulness practice, right?
Yes.
Notice, pay attention, use that data.
Yeah. And you are a yoga therapist, and yoga begins with that. So, but I'm a yoga practitioner too for a long time, like about 20 years now.
That is a good reminder, Shelley. Nia has spent kind of speaking from a lot of experience, and
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. What happens, Nia, if you're someone who feels like you don't have a stoop where you are? What do you do?
So I will say, please read the chapter. There are some suggestions in there to find your own. But as you're listening
Spoiler
to
alert.
before you get to the chapter, I think you can have a stoop with as few as 3 people. So it's finding those people that you feel safe with and starting those, open, honest, vulnerable conversations, finding that shared set of values, and then inviting others in. And they may not all fit. If you think about sort of literal stoops and literal neighborhoods too, people will come and go. They'll show up when they need, they'll arrive with what they have. And sometimes it's a resource and sometimes it's an ask for support. And I've seen this with the sort of stoop community that I have the luxury of being part of. There are meetings where there's, easily 300 people, and there's meetings where there's 40, and it's all fine. Whoever has capacity arrives with whatever it is they're arriving with. And, whether it's 3 people or 300 people, that's not what defines success. It's, do you feel safe? Do you feel connected? Do you feel heard? And are you able to practice listening deeply to those humans and being present with them in whatever their experience is, whether it's joy or suffering, births or losses? It's that sense of showing up in community to be that community for each other.
Thank you so much, Nia. And if you just for our listener, there's much more to learn from Nia's chapter. So for sure, get the book when it's out in a few weeks. Moving over to you, Shelley, one of the lines in your story that really struck me is the following, and it says, "Is it camaraderie or is it friendship?" And so what's the difference in your mind between these two things? And how do you know when you have one versus the other?
So I think camaraderie, as I hear it and have experienced it, and I'm not going by the literal definitions of it, it's just being nice out of courtesy. Like, I met you at work, I'll say hello because It's more of courtesy and norms and etiquettes you practice in an environment. Like if you go to a temple, you'll take out your shoes. So that's like camaraderie. It's not really coming out from deep sense of belonging or anything. It's just a practice or a norm you follow, right? So that's what it means to me, right? And friendship is much deeper. Like my introduction, as I said, I'm a friend, so that means deeply, and it's not something which gets formed in a minute or so. It's like wine. It takes time to create its own essence, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's like somewhere you are your authentic self, right? Like you're not conscious about what you're saying, who you are. You are just who you are. You are just being in the moment, in the present, and whatever you want to. You can be angry, you can be as vulnerable, and also friends look out for each other, right? Irrespective of thinking about the politics of the situation or repercussions of the situations. And if they know this is right or wrong for you, they'll just call you and they'll put the facts as they are. So that's how I um, differentiate the two.
Yeah, this reminds me, Shelley, I don't know if that you guys have ever seen this movie, The Truman Show, I think is what it's called. It just reminds me of how Jim Carrey kind of always waves at his neighbors in the
Yeah.
morning, and it seems very, very, very friendly. Like the community seems very friendly, but
Okay.
as you watch the movie, you realize like they don't have much of a deep relationship with each other.
Yeah.
They're only interacting at this superficial level.
Yeah. And also, like, one thing I would also want to add, like, as Naya was talking about her stoop concept, right? Like being feeling safe and that's okay, but that still is not the friendship thing for me, because you can go to a community, you can feel safe being heard, but at that point of also is like you're not still as vulnerable and as like you you're not creating your own norms in that kind of community. Also, even though you're feeling safe, you're still following the norms of the place. Like you go to a meditation center, you feel safe, calm, but that's not your friends. The friends are like who sees your
Hmm.
mess, who sees your positive side. Like I think that's what the like day-to-day stuff is. So yeah.
I see. It's sort of this concept of being as you are. I think
Yeah.
you said this earlier. Just be as you are, show up as you really are.
And they know it sometimes more than you. Like you wouldn't be able to know what you're feeling at that moment, and like no, they'll show you the mirror. See here, Shelly, this is what it is. You're missing out. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, sometimes they know more about you than you know about yourself, or at least in that very moment where
Yes.
you might be
Yeah.
blinded by various things
Yeah.
happening, and they're a good support for that.
Yep.
Yeah, love that. You also introduced this concept of the familial versus individualistic culture, and you talked about this when you talked about moving from India to the US almost 10
Mhm.
years ago.
Yep.
Did you feel, Shelley, that you have changed, or how have things changed since then from that moment? Because you were writing it from the perspective of someone who just arrived to the US.
Yeah.
And how have things changed for you since then?
Yeah. So I think every environment and every place teaches you, irrespective of the boundaries of a country. Like I have moved different cities in India as well, so things change, but then there are norms of the places which still are consistent across geographies. And there is a huge difference which I observed when I moved to US. Like simple things, like right, like back in India, if I'm in an area where my friends live and I just finish my thing and I'll just drop by unannounced. And it's simply acceptable. I may get surprised at times that they're not at home, but it's still, if they're at home, they will like won't be like, oh, I don't have time, I'm busy with this, nothing like that. You can just you are just always welcome. But that's not the case in US. I did the same thing to a friend once, and it's not that this friend was newly formed friend in Bay Area. I knew this family, these people for 20 years. Okay, like they're friends from a long, long time. And this friend was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm teaching my kid right now. I can't do this." And it's just like I just went, like they opened the door, and I said, "It's okay. I'm just so." Those are the things which are different, right? And another thing which I observe, like going back to the family versus individualistic, I think this is also a concept which maps to that. And another thing is like when I speak, I used to say, "Oh, we do this in India." Like if you noticed in this conversation, I said, "Oh, I went unannounced," but 8 years back, I would have said, "We went unannounced back in India." Right? So that whole thing of being able to speak for others as a community, it's acceptable because it's more of a community culture. So we are speaking on behalf of each other. But here, it's not like that. And at times, I realized that people did take offense when I said we, and it was not a conscious thing that I was speaking on their behalf or talking about their emotions. It was still a team thing or a group thing. And but I'm grateful that they pointed it out to me, because goes back to when you are in a place, you should follow the norms of that place. So over a period of time, that is something. And another thing which like used to be happening, like at work, after work, or on Fridays, or even on a weekday, like, okay, let's go for happy hours, right? And there would be somebody or the other always available. Right? And that kind of made a group, and then you hang out, and when you hang out, these people would invite their own friends as well, somebody else. So like you just form a community of people, and then you get connected, and then you do things otherwise as well. Here it was everything by the clock. Oh, you have to, like, it used to be like 4 weeks in advance you have to take an appointment for a happy hour, and I still haven't gotten used to that part yet. I haven't yet accepted. Like somebody says, "Oh, I am free like 6 weeks from now." I said, "I cannot commit for anything 6 weeks from now." On a social plan. Let's connect. You can keep it on your calendar. Let's connect, and let's talk it in a week before that. So that part I have still not changed.
The example you provided about a family coming to your doorstep, and then you wanted to have a social moment with them. I don't know exactly what to call it, or a drop in, but they were doing something that actually happened to me before. A family came in and like knocked, and they wanted to, I don't know what they wanted to
Yeah.
do. That's sort of the weird thing. Even in the language I use, I had to
Yeah.
say they wanted to ... like as if there
Yeah.
has to be a purpose for the visit.
Right.
And one of the things that was going on in my head was, oh, we're not ready because we haven't prepared anything, we haven't cleaned up,
Yeah.
like the toys are all over the place. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of what you said earlier, Shelley, about just being who you are is a big part of friendship. Like you just, if they
Yeah.
show
Because
up, like, yeah, come in, like maybe you can teach the child to do their assignment, or maybe
exactly,
you can cook
that's
dinner.
what is the family culture and the community culture, is because that's what exactly has happened. Even not that if you're not teaching the kid, they'll say, "Oh, I am not yet done with the cooking. Can you go and finish the cooking in the kids?" Like something or the else, or just hang out while I'm done with this, right? Something. But yeah, so that was a huge change for me.
Yeah, I might try to show up in a friend's house over the weekend and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley. I think oh yeah. So you've got a lot of meaty topics in your chapter. The other one was you talk about competition and how competition in the workplace might be a barrier to creating
Yeah.
genuine and meaningful relationships. Do you have any advice as you've experienced that in your life, like how to deal with competition in the workplace in a way
Sure.
that's healthy?
So I want to share an experience about competition before, because competition brings best in people, right? It's not always unhealthy. It does not always create friction, right? Like back in my high school days, like me and my friends used to compete with each other, right? And that competition actually made me better and also developed these bonds which I still cherish. So I think if I that's the chapter in my life book which I would take to give any recommendation and advice, that even though we had a great competition, we were not enemies. There was no jealousy, no envy. Like
Mm.
we helped each other succeed, right? Like if I had a tough time with physics, right? So this friend of mine would sit down with me and teach me physics, right? So uh, and even though we were competing like in the grades, like who gets more grades at the end of the day, still he would sit down with me, and I would do the same for maths because I was a maths geek back in school, right? So we shared all the information, we helped each other succeed, and at the end of the day, then the best score wins, right? It was that. So I think the same thing, if we start applying at work, like we can compete with each other, we can have that healthy competition, then this competition becomes good, and we can create this atmosphere, what Naya calls at stoop, right? Like atmosphere where people can feel safe. But unfortunately, in today's corporate world with the rat race, we are associating our success to the titles rather than the process of learning.
Mm.
And that is what is making this competition a bad thing rather than a healthy thing which can help us get better. So if we can focus on learning, detach ourselves from the titles, and just start contributing, and in the process it's amazing that people do succeed also. The people do get titles after that also, because they keep creating so much value, and at the same time it also dilutes the insecurities of the people around you. And that kind of helps uplift, because then if you go and take my feedback from the people, they'll say, oh yeah, she was so helpful in this, and starts uplifting you in a different way. It could be a slow process, and there would be people whose insecurities would be so high that even though you do this, they would still feel insecure because their emotional well-being is not that strong to understand that. So yeah, so it's like that, but focusing on learning and trying to detach from the titles your success, I think that is a key to success itself. Mm.
It reminds me of something you said earlier, Nia, when you mentioned the polyvagal theory. And some people summarize that as, green, yellow, and red, with green sort of being safety, and then yellow being fight and flee, and then red being freeze. It's sort of healthy competition is grounded in safety, but with a little bit of fighting and fleeing. So it's like a combination of green and yellow.
Mm.
But the grounding and safety is the important part, because you don't really feel like you're ever in real danger. But it's nice to feel like a little bit that you're in
Yeah.
danger. It's sort of like how animals, play fight with
Uh-huh.
each other. A little bit of excitement is
Yeah.
always helpful
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
How you
One,
learn. And
yeah,
it sits on that stress curve, right? Most people know the Eric-Stodson stress curve. It's where that point of growth is between that sort of fight, flight, and safe space. Because if you're completely safe and comfortable, you're not learning. It's lovely to be there, but you don't want to live there either, because there's very little growth in that situation.
Actually, I used to feel that same, but as I went through the journey of compassion, I realized that feeling safe and focusing on learning can still do that for you. So, interestingly, I used to get sometimes pissed off at Scott Shoot, like our co-founder in the early days, because my compassion was like totally negative, and he would be always calm. And I'm like, why is he so calm? We need to solve this problem. And how could he remain so calm? right. And then as I went through my own journey of compassion, and I did circle back with him once, and I set up my one-on-one with him, and I told him, hey Scott, you used to do this and I used to get angry at this, but now I understand that what it means to remain calm and still be focused on solving problems and being having growth. Because if the focus is shifting to learning, and that is what you attach your happiness to, that if I learn today something, I am happy, and then you'll keep growing, right? That you don't really have to feel that adrenaline rush of whatever that, like, okay, a fire is happening, so I have to run, kind of a thing, right? So I don't know, my experience taught me differently, and I think when you talk to Scott, you should ask him about this.
I agree with you, Shelley. I think there has to be some element of excitement, but the
Yeah.
excitement doesn't have to be driven by threat. It could be driven
Yes.
by interest,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
curiosity and interest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My last question for you, Shelley, on your chapter. You talk about in the end of the story how you have now developed genuine bonds with other people at work.
Yeah.
What was it that unlocked that for you?
I think what I just shared about the healthy competition, like focusing on how to help others and how to remain focused on learning, I think that actually helped me a lot, right? Like, so for about 6 years, I just let it go. I said, I'm not going to talk about my promotions to even my manager. I'm not going to do anything. The only thing I would want to do is how can I create value for my team and LinkedIn, right? So I think I worked with that. Initially it was not easy because it was not my natural muscle at that point of time, because until 2017, 2018, I was just driven by, oh, I need to get to the next level, I need to, like, by that. So like the comment I was making, so therefore my experience through that journey, like I realized that. And then for 5 years I actually just focused on that, and through that I actually collaborated with people on the shared goal, because my focus was how to deliver the quality result, right? Like, how do I make this product better, how do I solve the customer problem, and how can I make the teams efficient so they don't burn out, right? So a combination of those things organically, naturally help me create those bonds. And at the end of it, going back to the example I was saying, I got the next title as well without even really like, then people around me were talking about, oh, why is she not promoted? Like, instead of me, they started talking about it. So yeah, so it actually comes in different forms and shapes.
One of the real values out of having a collaborative book is we get these different perspectives on a subject, so you really get a 360-degree view of it. And I
Yeah.
enjoyed how in your chapter, Shelley, you kind of ended with this idea of friendly competition was an important part. And I think in your chapter, Nia, you talked about how safety is a big part of the feeling that you get in a stoop. And both of those are probably true. They're just different ways by which you can develop this sense of belonging and relationship in a workplace.
And I believe that's connected too, right? Because when you have psychological safety, that's when you are able to do a healthy competition, right? So it's just again a virtuous cycle.
So much so. And I love, Shelley, when you were mentioning sort of this comfort in sort of supporting people to learn, because you don't have to be the only expert in the area. It doesn't build capacity for organizations either.
Yeah.
You're a star player who won't help anyone and won't teach anyone anything at all. What happens when that person leaves? Where does it leave the organization? Where does it leave the team?
Yeah.
So Nia, Shelley, thank you so much. I've learned so much from your chapters, as well as this conversation about what it means to belong and how deeper relationships across the many facets of our lives, including work, can play an important role in our lives. Thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom with our listeners, our readers, and the Changing Work community. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to see if our listeners would like to learn more about you or reach out to you. What's the best way for them to do that? Maybe let's start with you, Nia.
Sure. folks can find me on LinkedIn. My name isn't very common, so it should be pretty easy. And my Instagram handle is in my Zoom name, so at Holistic Yoga Therapist for Instagram users. My website is holisticyogatherapy.ca, because Canada. But yeah, those are probably the best ways to get at me. Or just Google me, and however Google tells you to find me also totally works.
Yeah, and for me it's the same. And I always say that my name is very easy to find, like Shelly Dhamija. There are not too many Shelly Dhamijas in the world yet. Yet. So Google search, yes, but that would lead you to LinkedIn page. So yeah, LinkedIn is my way to reach out to me. You can book an appointment using LinkedIn. You can message me, and yeah.
Thank you again, Nia, Shelley. Changing Work's third collaborative book, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work, is scheduled to be published on May 30th, 2025, as we said earlier. If you enjoyed this conversation, we invite you to explore our first two best-selling books, Leading with Self-Awareness, starting from the Inside Out, and our second book, Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. Shelley and I were both authors in the second one. These are available now on bookshop.org, that's bookshop.org, and amazon.com. If this conversation sparked something meaningful for you, please consider sharing it with your network. And if you'd like to connect with others on the journey to create more conscious, human-centered workplaces, we invite you to learn more about our growing community at changingwork.org. That's changingwork.org. Thank you again for being part of the movement to change work from the inside out. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.